Have you ever had a feeling that something was wrong, but you couldn't figure out what it was? I've had this feeling for the last 160 miles, and it pisses me off. It's hard for me to call myself paranoid, but if I get caught up in one thought, it will be difficult for me to let it go until I get to the truth. It's both good and very bad. My name is John Moretti, a 30-year-old married man residing in Plano, a suburb of North Dallas. Currently, I'm on the road nearing Oklahoma City after about 3 hours of driving. This trip is an annual tradition for me and my college buddies, where we head to Arkansas for a fishing expedition. Each year, I eagerly anticipate this journey with my fraternity brothers from Oklahoma University. Go Sooners! While my wife joined us for the first 2 years of our marriage, she opted out last year. Presently, I'm accompanied by Antonio Perez in the van, but we'll pick up 2 more friends in Oklahoma City. As I mentally review our packing list, everything seems in order. Everything seemed to be in order. I proceeded to check my house. Had I remembered to lock the door? Was the stove left on by mistake? Did I leave the toilet seat up? Nothing seemed amiss. Despite going through this mental checklist numerous times since bidding Ellen farewell at noon and leaving the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Turning my attention to work matters, I confirmed that I had completed the vacation request form, provided my whereabouts and cell number to my boss for contact purposes, and ensured I had my laptop with me. Contemplating Ellen, my wife, everything appeared normal, mirroring previous years when I embarked on similar trips. Despite a lack of recent indications suggesting otherwise, a fleeting thought crossed my mind. Was Ellen being unfaithful? My jealousy surfaced whenever Ellen garnered extra attention in public, but she always dismissed advances and remained by my side as a devoted spouse. It was inconceivable to me that she could stray. I had made my stance clear when I called off our wedding a month before the scheduled date. 4 years prior, Ellen attempted to have one last rendezvous with an ex-boyfriend, Brian Jennings. They went on a final date to bid farewell. I anticipated that she would commit to me once she had accepted my proposal and adorned the engagement ring. Upon learning about the date, I discreetly entered the bar of the restaurant and observed. It pained me to witness her passionately kissing another man while wearing my engagement ring. After the 3rd kiss, I intervened and demanded the return of the ring. Extending my hand, I stated, "It's quite simple, Ellen. You can have your last date with him or any other man, but not with my ring on your finger." Reluctantly, she removed the ring. "But we will still get married. I just need closure," I persisted, still holding out my hand. "If I propose to you again and you say yes, then we will get married. However, I will need to propose again." "What?" I gazed at her calmly and inquired, "What seems to be the matter?" "I gave you permission to go on your date. A single woman has the freedom to date whoever she chooses. If you prefer to be single rather than engaged, just return the ring, and we'll call off the engagement. You'll be single again, and you can bid farewell to him however you like." She simply stared at me, speechless. Taking the ring from her hand, I turned to her ex-boyfriend, Brian, and said, "Brian, please forgive the inconvenience. Enjoy your date." With that, I walked away, resolute and unwavering. To me, wearing a ring symbolized a commitment to fidelity, a declaration that one had chosen to forego other romantic pursuits. As I approached the restaurant's exit, Ellen rushed after me in a panic. "No, John, please don't do this. I want to marry you." Turning back to her, I replied, "Ellen, you're making a scene. Return to your date, and we'll discuss this later. You still have to bid farewell to your past boyfriends, don't you?" She glanced at her former flame, then back at me. "No, I love you and only you. Please take me back. I promise I'm finished with dating other men." For the 2nd time in my life, I knelt down, offering her the ring, and asked Ellen to marry me. The restaurant patrons applauded as she accepted the ring. I had remained steadfast in my principles of honor and fidelity, establishing my expectation of faithfulness in our relationship. Coming back to the present for the 31st time, I found myself empty-handed. I was gnawed by a feeling of awkwardness, as if something was wrong. It was an inner feeling that I couldn't get rid of. As we drove past Norman, I forced myself to focus on the traffic ahead, pushing my concerns to the back of my mind. Antonio and I discussed our plans to rendezvous with the others in Bricktown, Oklahoma City's bustling entertainment district. Our hotel, the Renaissance, nestled in the heart of Bricktown, was our base. Drawing from my 4 years at OU, I navigated the familiar streets effortlessly. 30 minutes later, we were checking into the Renaissance, unpacking in our room. The clock now read 3:15. A blinking light on our phone caught Antonio's attention. He glanced at me and uttered 2 words: Bricktown Brewery. I countered with Toby Keith's. Antonio reached for the phone, tapped a few buttons, and replied, Earl's Rib Palace. We exchanged knowing looks, almost simultaneously realizing Tony beat us here, didn't he? A shared sigh escaped us both. When you hang out with 2 Tonys, one inevitably becomes Tony, and the other Antonio. I was with Antonio, a year junior to Tony, who had claimed the name Tony first. Antonio, having studied Italian for 3 years in college, embraced his namesake. Tony had a penchant for ribs. Whenever he chose the restaurant, it was invariably a rib joint. Today, being the first to arrive, Tony had the privilege of selecting our meeting spot. Eating ribs was fine with me, but I would have preferred a bar and grill as our meeting spot. It was almost 4 o'clock, and I anticipated the guys would start arriving within the next 2 to 3 hours. Hanging out at the bar while everyone showed up seemed like a good plan. However, Earl's, where we were supposed to meet, was a rib joint, and staying there for 3 hours would become monotonous. Our priority was to find Tony at Earl's, convince him to change the location. Antonio tossed his bag onto the bed. Do you think we can persuade him to change his mind? I placed my bags beside my bed. Probably, but not until after he's done with his ribs. Toby Keith's is just around the corner. How about we team up on this? Antonio agreed, and we headed to Earl's together. As we walked towards Earl's, it dawned on me. I glanced at the street sign, Johnny Bench Drive, and it clicked. Earl's and Toby Keith's were both on Johnny Bench Drive, which made me think of baseball. Suddenly, I remembered my baseball and realized it had been tampered with. When I reached for my fishing tackle, I noticed my baseball, proudly bearing Nolan Ryan's signature. That was the issue. It wasn't my Nolan Ryan baseball. It was actually my Pete Incaviglia baseball that Nolan Ryan had signed. It was the home run ball hit by Pete during a game at Arlington Stadium in August of 1989. It wasn't thrown by Ryan. I had caught it. In August 1989, at the age of 9, I experienced true bliss, sitting next to my father in the distant stands. There were only 2 of us, my father, Parker Moretti, and I, his little son, standing with a glove at the ready. Despite the scorching August heat, which must have exceeded 100 degrees, I refused to take off my glove, even when sweat was dripping from it. I was convinced that today would be the day when I would catch the ball, just as I believed every time we visited the stadium. Although I often returned home disappointed, I reassured myself that I just hadn't tried hard enough. If only I hadn't looked away during the 4th inning. Maybe this would have been my moment to score a goal. I had to stay clean and unwaveringly focused on the game, knowing that only then would the ball hit my side. I remained rooted in my seat, foregoing food, and never shifting my gaze from the batter's box once a player stepped in. With each new batter, I entered into my own mantra: hit it to me, hit it to me, hit it to me. Then, in the 8th inning, Pete Incaviglia approached the box ready to swing for the fences, as he always did. Let me introduce you to Pete Incaviglia. In 1986, he made history as the 15th player in Major League history to debut without ever playing a single game in the minor leagues. That season, he set records for home runs and strikeouts for his club. I vividly recall seeing Pete launch 2 balls past the outfield bleachers, literally hitting them out of the ballpark. He was a formidable slugger and my personal hero. During this particular at-bat, Pete displayed uncharacteristic patience, taking the lead in the count. It was unlike the Petey I admired, who typically swung aggressively. Unaware of the pitcher's waning strength, I couldn't understand why my hero wasn't taking swings. How could I catch a home run ball if he didn't swing? I wondered. Then, at a 2-kennel count, Pete unleashed a powerful hit, narrowly missing fair territory. He allowed another pitch to pass before fouling off several more. With a full count after the 5th foul, the pitcher made a critical error, serving up a hanging slider that Pete hammered right into my waiting glove. My patience mantra and trusty glove had finally paid off, rewarding me with my prized possession. For the remainder of the game, I scrutinized every detail of the ball, committing its every stitch and mark to memory. After the game, my father escorted me to the player's entrance to seek Pete's autograph. With pleading eyes and persistent requests, I persuaded a gatekeeper to ask Pete Incaviglia if he would sign the ball. Perhaps it was my unwavering determination or my pleading expression, but after a brief wait, a trainer took the ball to the locker room to see if Pete would oblige. When the trainer returned, holding a signed ball, I spun it in my hands and burst into tears. "This isn't mine. Where's my ball?" "They took it? Pah, I want my ball." Tears streamed down my cheeks. My chin trembled, and despite the guard urging us to move on, I stood my ground. My father gestured towards the signature, insisting it was genuine, but I remained unconvinced. When the guard insisted once more, my father's patience wore thin, and he pulled me away from the gate. My legs gave way, and I crumpled as my father dragged me along. "It's got grass stains, grass stains. This can't be my ball." My father halted, turned to me, then to the guard. With a sigh, he helped me up and led me back to the gate. "All right, son, make me believe." At just 9 years old, I delivered what I believed to be my best speech. The umpire tossed it to the pitcher, who then threw the ball. Pete hit it, and I caught it. Pete Incaviglia kept the count full, fouling off numerous balls. Each time the umpire replaced the ball. The one Pete hit never touched the ground. It passed only between the player's hands, never touching the grass. There shouldn't be any grass stains on it. Though I started to ramble, my father recognized the truth in my words and supported me. Addressing the guard, he asserted, "He's correct. That ball was only used once, hit for a home run. The ball my son Johnny wants is the home run ball he caught. It doesn't matter if Pete Incaviglia signed it. I want my son's ball returned." In that moment, and forever after, my father became my hero. He stood by me, a young child, against the objections of grown men. He taught me the importance of standing firm in my beliefs, and that day he believed in me. News spread to the locker room about the kid who noticed the ball switch, and soon 6 balls were presented for me to choose from. Ignoring player signatures, I selected the one with Nolan Ryan's autograph. When asked why, I detailed the differences in stitching and the smudge where the bat had made contact. I even described the remnants of Lena Blackburn's rubbing mud, applied by the umpire before the game. I had nailed it, right down to the faint mark revealing 3 digits that partly identified Pete's bat model number. Pete had hit the ball squarely in the sweet spot, making the markings unmistakable. With trembling legs, I held the ball against my chest and let out a cry. I kept my gaze fixed on my ball as I recounted every detail I knew about it, handling it as if it were a precious gem. I must have rambled on about that ball for 5 minutes straight. When I finally looked up, there were 6 players in casual clothes standing around, all smiling at me, including Pete Incaviglia. One of them turned to Pete and remarked, "You've got to check if the ball matches the bat, Inky." Pa and I were then invited into the locker room, the hallowed sanctuary of baseball, where we headed to Pete's locker. Pete retrieved the bat he had used to hit the ball and took a seat. Sure enough, the bat bore smudges where it had connected with the ball, and those smudges matched perfectly. In the locker, there were several balls, all bearing signatures. Pete recounted what had transpired. After hitting the game-winning home run, he intended to distribute signed balls to fans as he left the stadium. Hastily gathering up about 6 balls, he signed them and placed them in his locker before heading to the shower. While Pete was showering, the trainer arrived and, finding him occupied, swapped out the game-winning ball for one of the signed ones. Apologizing for the confusion, Pete then signed both the ball and the bat. Tears filled my eyes as he handed them over to me, and I felt pure bliss for quite some time. I have no memory of being driven home or put to bed. I must have slept with that bat and ball for a week until my father returned with a ball holder to preserve them. He enjoyed recounting the story to his friends, and after a month he convinced me to stop sleeping with the bat as well. Returning to the present moment, this memory will remain etched in my mind for the entirety of my life, shaping me into the person I am today. It's essential to grasp that it wasn't Nolan Ryan's baseball I acquired. It was Pete Incavilla's home run. That ball, my chosen possession, will forever hold a place of pride with Pete's signature adorning its surface, not Nolan's. I couldn't bear to leave the ball in its current state. It needed someone to acknowledge it and restore its rightful condition. This realization was ingrained in me, not through conscious thought, but subconsciously as I reached for my fishing gear. Despite my unconscious realization, the image remained vivid. My eyes beheld Nolan Ryan's signature, ensuring I could never leave the ball in such a state no matter what. As I strolled along Johnny Bench Drive, a rush of memories overwhelmed me, leaving me in a daze. I trailed behind Antonio, but managed to keep pace as we approached Earl's Rib Palace. When Antonio changed course suddenly, I followed suit. It wasn't until the aroma of barbecue penetrated my consciousness that I snapped out of my reverie and hastened my steps. Upon entering, we spotted Tony and George, each with a plate of ribs before them. Diane, George's wife, was also present, accompanied by her younger sister Ashley. After exchanging greetings, we took our seats. There was some debate with Tony about relocating to Toby Keith's, and he made his stance clear by giving Ashley a 20 to fetch more ribs. The pecking order was established, with Tony having arrived first. Antonio went to grab 2 beers, while I leisurely sipped mine, contemplating what to do about my baseball. However, there seemed to be little I could do. The idea of driving back to Dallas just to fix a baseball on a trophy shelf felt absurd. Moreover, it wouldn't address the pressing question, who was tampering with my belongings? Lost in thought, George interrupted my reverie. "John, are you planning to drown your sorrows tonight?" "What?" "John, you've barely touched your beer and you're already getting gloomy. Snap out of it. Whatever's going on at the office, leave it behind. You're on vacation. Lighten up and enjoy yourself." I nodded in agreement, feeling a surge of energy, and clinked bottles with George. It seemed like the natural response. Then a thought struck me. If someone tampered with my baseball, they might have meddled with my fishing gear too, which I kept back at the hotel. Standing up, I quickly finished my beer, excused myself, and mentioned that I needed to check something in the van. On my way back to the hotel, I encountered 2 other people, though it was still relatively early, around 4:30, when I rifled through my tackle box. As expected, 3 lures were missing, including 2 I had used to reel in stripers with Ellen's boss Carl earlier in the summer. Those lures had landed me some impressive catches, and Carl had seen it all. What aggravated me more was that I had plans to use those very lures over the weekend. I was furious. It wasn't just about replacing them. I wanted my lures. They had been instrumental in landing tournament-sized stripers, with Carl as a witness. It took me only 10 seconds to have my keys in the ignition and the engine revving. As I fastened my seatbelt, a moment of doubt crept in. I hesitated, foot on the brake, hand on the shifter. Was I being irrational? Driving 3 hours back to Dallas just to rearrange a baseball and retrieve my lures seemed excessive. Then driving back another 3 hours to the hotel. If I was lucky, I'd be back by 11. It sounded absurd. Yet if I pushed it, maybe I could make it back by 10 or 10:30. While on my way back, I remembered something else I needed to grab: photo albums. I had a few from my college years and reunions. Yeah, I admit it. I'm a bit obsessive. So what? We could flip through them in the evenings. They always sparked good storytelling. I shifted the van into gear and hit the road. Just as I was leaving the parking lot, George called. I informed him that I'd catch some rest at the hotel before meeting up with them later. Then I glanced at my phone and powered it down. I wasn't sure if Ellen was aware of the tampering with my belongings. Plus, I wanted to figure out when Carl had visited our house. Something felt off, and I aimed to make my trip back to Dallas untraceable. I sped down the highway and arrived back home around 7:30, only to find Ellen's car missing from the driveway. Hastily, I checked my stash and examined my ball. It turned out to be a replica, swapped out. Despite it being more than 20 years since I acquired that ball, I could still recognize the signatures, and the distinctive smudge was absent. Carl. Searching for my fishing lures yielded nothing. They were nowhere to be found, neither beside nor behind the cabinet. It had to be Carl. I could sense his frustration about the fishing trip, and now he had taken my lures. Entering the master bedroom to change clothes, I spotted a Victoria's Secret bag on the bed, containing only receipts. "Oh, Ellen, what on earth are you up to?" But I had a strong suspicion of who she was with. Carl. My anger surged. I returned to my van and retrieved my camouflage pants and shirt. I've always questioned the logic of fishing and camouflage. Will the fish really be deceived? Nevertheless, it was a tradition within the fraternity, so I went along with it. After changing, I grabbed the fake ball and made my way to Carl's. Parking the van discreetly, I strolled down the alley behind Carl's house and slipped into the backyard. I didn't have a concrete plan yet, but I had a camera and knew where Carl kept his spare house key under a rock. Having visited Carl's place a few times before, I was familiar with the layout. Even if they had opted for a hotel room, there might still be a chance to retrieve my belongings if I spoke to his wife, Melissa. As I passed by the master bedroom window, I heard Ellen moaning. I recognized her moans and feared she might have ended our marriage with infidelity. I had been very clear about my stance on cheating a month before we got married. Sighing, I was relieved that we hadn't started a family yet and were still focusing on building our finances. Renting our house, we were still working toward a significant down payment, so Ellen could eventually become a stay-at-home mother. With only 4 years of marriage under our belt, dividing everything wouldn't be too complicated. I was still furious, itching to confront Carl, but I was wary of getting arrested. Peeking through the window, I attempted to see what was happening inside, but the drawn blinds obstructed any view. Unable to capture evidence with my camera, I felt stuck, yet determined to retrieve my belongings. Carl frequently hosted extravagant parties, boasting about his den centerpiece, a custom-built bar adorned with glass elements and vibrant neon lights showcasing his liquor collection. Considering the possibility that he might have stashed my belongings inside or behind the bar, I resolved to sneak into his house to investigate. Despite the ongoing commotion between Ellen and Carl, I stealthily slid open the door and slipped inside. Pausing to listen, I detected no change in the sounds emanating from the bedroom. Quietly closing the sliding door behind me, I approached the bar. To my relief, I found all my possessions neatly arranged on the shelf behind the bar. The fishing lures, the baseball, and even a stack of baseball cards, a detail I hadn't initially considered but knew he had taken. These items held immense sentimental value, symbols of my life, and he had callously taken them. Swiftly, I replaced the baseball and substituted 3 old lures for my cherished ones. As for the baseball cards, lacking replacements, I pocketed them. Exiting through the sliding door, I was about to open it when I heard Ellen reaching climax, followed by Carl. I waited, mindful of Ellen's tendency to be loud. With the possibility of a neighbor overhearing, I remained patient, ears tuned in. After about 30 seconds, the sounds from the bedroom subsided, prompting me to cautiously open the door and step out. As I was about to close it, I caught Ellen's startled yelp. "Stop that! What do you think you're doing? Just relax. I'm only going to try something different." "No, you're not. I haven't even let John do that. Relax. I'll be gentle, and it'll give you clarity about what you want with John. I don't want that. Listen, if you try it with John, he'll want to do it again. But with me, it'll be our secret, and John will be none the wiser. Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. Just trust me and let me guide you. Remember those positions I showed you that John liked?" A moment of silence followed. "Will you be gentle?" she asked. "Yes, just try to relax," he assured. "Wait, what is it?" "It's Vaseline. It helps to keep the lubricant longer. But you can't use condoms with this." "That's right, and you won't get pregnant." "But what if I do get pregnant?" "But Ellen, we already agreed that you would get pregnant from me, didn't we?" I lowered my head, admitting defeat. Was that all it took? What influence did he have on her? Despite my repeated request to try something new, this dude managed to persuade her in less than 30 seconds, and to top it all off, they were plotting for Ellen to have a child with him. All hope of reconciliation vanished from my mind. Our marriage is over. I quietly closed the door and slipped away. As I was hiding the key under a stone, a movement in the study caught my attention. I ducked behind a bush dressed in a camouflage uniform and watched. Carl appeared in a bathrobe, heading for the bar. The flick of a switch and neon lights illuminated the glass case, casting reflections on the liquor bottles. He selected a decanter of fancy-fasted glass and poured 2 drinks. After quickly draining one, he refilled his glass and toasted toward a shelf decorated with baseball memorabilia, baits, and cards. Although there were no cards now, Carl seemed puzzled. Before I go on with what happened, it's important to note that I've always believed in karma. Maybe it's the notion that good wins in the end, or maybe it's related to the moment I caught Pete Incavilla's baseball. Karma for me meant that if I were worthy, fate would be kind to me. That night, I witnessed how karma struck Carl. Carl, in a fit of anger, forcefully slammed the elegant crystal decanter onto the glass bar counter, shattering both the top and the decanter itself. The impact sent the decanter crashing into the liquor bottles on the upper shelf, causing them to break along with the shelf. Subsequently, the shelves below collapsed like dominoes, causing further damage by breaking more bottles and spilling their contents onto the neon lights positioned at the base of the bar. As the broken glass ruptured the neon lights, Carl found himself engulfed in a sudden fireball. I later found out that Carl had applied a significant amount of Vaseline to his instrument. It became obvious that the use of petroleum-based lubricants on a male instrument is not recommended in the event of a ball lightning. I found that the ignition temperature of Vaseline is 365 degrees Fahrenheit. I witnessed Carl dancing frantically as flames engulfed his instrument. Ellen entered the room and tried to put out the flames, but her hands also caught fire, presumably because of the Vaseline. Fortunately, they managed to wrap themselves in a blanket to put out the flames, although part of the room continued to burn, filling the house with smoke. Feeling the urgency, I decided to leave when Ellen reached for the phone. When I didn't see Melissa, Carl's wife, I assumed she must have been out of town. I returned to my van and drove home, passing fire and emergency trucks rushing toward Carl's house. I imagined Carl sharing an extraordinary tale with his wife, Melissa. Unsure if anyone had spotted me, I planned to act clueless upon my return to Bricktown. Arriving home, I discovered that I couldn't replace my ball in its holder. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed another ball and expertly forged the signatures, perhaps even better than Carl. After placing the fake ball back, prominently displaying Nolan Ryan's signature, I set off for Oklahoma with my photo albums in tow. During the journey, I was overcome by a sense of calm. The anger I had harbored dissipated when I witnessed Carl's sad situation. Although I cherished thoughts of confronting him, the sight of his flaming instrument strangely satisfied my desire for revenge. Returning to Dallas, I realized that what I witnessed was more enjoyable than any revenge I could have carried out. It seemed unlikely that Carl would interfere in marriages anytime soon. I continued to smile and laugh, fully aware that both of them had gotten themselves into trouble. I was itching to let them know that I had caught them in the act. As I stumbled upon my friends in Bricktown close to midnight, I was welcomed warmly, asked about my rest, and handed a beer. It felt as if I hadn't been away at all. It seemed like my friends believed it and would be able to maintain that I hadn't made the journey to Dallas and back. The following day, I powered up my mobile phone with a sense of uncertainty. I received a message from Ellen informing me about Carl's accident and his hospitalization, along with a request to call her on her cell phone. While I was relieved that there were no fatalities, I had no desire to converse with someone I considered unfaithful, so I promptly turned off my phone. There was just the one call and no indication whatsoever of her wrongdoing. It seemed she was attempting to conceal her infidelity. Determined to uncover the truth, I contacted the credit card companies and my cell phone provider, requesting records dating back 4 years. Although it required a fee to have them emailed to me, I was resolved to meticulously review our financial records and phone bills to ascertain the extent of her betrayal. When we eventually organized our convoy to Arkansas, we numbered 24, including fraternity friends and their partners. Despite enjoying myself, I may have indulged in alcohol excessively. George kept an eye on me and eventually assigned Ashley, his sister-in-law, as my caretaker. During the second day's dinner, I occupied a table alone in the restaurant engrossed with my laptop. Ashley approached and took a seat beside me. Ellen was unfaithful, wasn't she? Was it that obvious? Not to everyone, but some women notice subtle signs, like a man nervously playing with his wedding ring while appearing tense. I glanced at my hands. It might be beneficial for you to have some space to process your emotions. I'll leave you be. Ashley began to leave. Still fixated on my hands, I murmured, "Please stay." Ashley hesitated, seeming torn between wanting to assist and respecting boundaries. Eventually, she turned back and sat across from me. "You don't have to explain anything. Let's just share a meal together." Ashley had quickly discerned the situation. She refrained from offering alcohol and lent a sympathetic ear. We conversed, simply conversed. As I switched to iced tea, Ashley and I found ourselves supervising the rest of the group. We all engaged in fishing while Ashley and I continued our conversations. We even dared to do karaoke one evening. Watching intoxicated individuals attempt to sing was oddly amusing, particularly when sober. Gradually, the other men also grasped the reality of my failing marriage. Some weren't surprised mentioning Ellen's advances toward them. I sifted through photo albums with the guys, realizing the signs had always been present. I had merely chosen to overlook them. I also received the statements for our credit cards and phones, and upon reviewing them, I noticed some recurring patterns. I was pleased to observe that I consistently used my credit card for meals during business trips, as it allowed me to cross-reference expenses with my reports. This provided me with a clear record of each trip I took. I noticed expenditures for clothing and salon visits, typically occurring on the days I traveled, while my partner had always claimed these were surprises for my return. It appeared they were intended for her lovers instead. Ellen's indiscretions were quite evident, and although I hadn't initially sought out evidence, I stumbled upon a trail of her infidelity. It became apparent that Ellen was a habitual cheater, with multiple affairs. By the fourth evening, I had pieced together a comprehensive understanding of the situation, including profiles of Ellen's paramours and the 3 men she had flirted with. Ashley arrived and took a seat. "What's the matter now?" "Ash, you know that part about in sickness and in health." "Yeah." I pivoted the laptop so we could both see it, pointing to the 5 photos at the top of the screen. "These are her conquests." Then I gestured to the 3 photos below. "And these are the 3 guys she flirted with on previous outings. Notice anything similar about them?" Ashley nodded. "They all look alike." I pointed to the photo in the bottom corner. "Just like her father, don't you think?" Ashley gasped. "You don't think?" I shook my head. "I can't be certain. Her father died 3 years ago in a car accident, but it seems she's drawn to a specific type for intimacy, perhaps beyond her control. That's why I'm questioning our commitment, thinking about in sickness and in health." Ashley met my gaze. "You can't trust her anymore, can you?" "Ash, she betrayed me by returning to Brian Jennings, despite my clear stance that it would end our engagement. The only change was she concealed the affair better. If I take her back, she must confess everything and seek help for this compulsion. Otherwise, she'll only become better at hiding her infidelities. John, it's your decision, but I doubt you'll find happiness in this marriage again. You'll always be suspicious, and that mistrust will erode the relationship. That's why I'll give it one chance. She needs to be willing to save the marriage, which means owning up to everything." We had dinner, watching my friends get embarrassed. I noticed that several other people had switched to iced tea and were also enjoying the spectacle. While we were enjoying dessert, Ashley started giving me meaningful looks. "What?" "I have whipped cream on my face. John, I've been thinking about how much you're hurting. Would you like to come to my cabin tonight?" I shook my head. "Ash, I don't want intimacy out of pity." "I don't want that either, John. If that's what I'm going to get, then don't worry. I don't want a weak man sleeping with me. I spent 5 days with a group of ex-frat boys, and I want to be dominated, to be taken by force. I suggest you do it in revenge." My eyes widened and sparkled with desire. I gazed at Ashley with intense longing, feeling my mouth water. However, I restrained myself. "John, you're not the only one facing issues here. I came up with my sister Diane to escape from the memories of my awful ex-boyfriend. I was hoping to have some wild experiences with multiple guys this week. Instead, I'm realizing that you guys look out for each other. Did you hear what George did? My meddling brother-in-law spread the word that I'm off limits this week because I'm hurting. I don't think he informed you, so it seems like he's trying to set us up. I just want someone to help me forget. I was hoping to have several of you indulge me this week, but it turns out you all have some damn loyalty code. John, I really need this, and I think you do too. Ash, as tempting as your offer is, I have to decline." Ashley grimaced. "Damn. Looks like I'll need another set of batteries then." On the 5th day of our stay, I received a message from the resort where we were renting cabins. It was from Melissa, Carl's wife. She had managed to locate me through my workplace and expressed a desire to speak. I bought a calling card and headed to a payphone. Melissa then disclosed everything to me. She was divorcing Carl. Ellen had sustained burns on her hands and had received treatment for smoke inhalation, but was otherwise all right. Carl had burns on his hands and genitals, but was expected to recover. Melissa was uncertain about the extent of sensation he would have once the burns healed, but he would survive. She had extracted a confession from both of them, claiming it was a one-time occurrence. Melissa requested access to credit card and cell phone records, to which I agreed. We arranged to meet to compare information before I confronted Ellen. As far as I could discern, nobody knew I had returned to Dallas. I intended to exploit this information to catch my wife in the act. In truth, I was privy to more details about Ellen's affairs than I wished anyone to know at that moment. I informed everyone that my wife had an accident, necessitating an early end to our vacation. Antonio accompanied me back home, while the others made their own travel arrangements. Upon my return to Dallas, I booked a hotel for the remaining days of my absence. I contacted Melissa to compare expenses, questioning the validity of our spouse's explanations. Despite overhearing unsettling information upon my arrival, I chose not to disclose it to Melissa, opting to keep quiet about the affair's duration. Having already pieced together the situation, I knew what evidence Melissa needed to see. Upon scrutiny, we discovered charges on Ellen's credit card preceding those on Carl's by a day or two, along with an increase in phone calls between them just before the hotel charges. By the week's end, I had a lawyer preparing divorce papers. Upon confronting Ellen upon my return, I pretended nothing was amiss. She admitted to a one-night fling, but failed to provide a full confession despite my insistence. I instructed her to move to the guest bedroom and get tested for STDs. Upon inspecting a baseball, I noted Pete Incaviglia's signature had been shifted forward, indicating Ellen's attempt to conceal her actions. Despite her pleas for reconciliation over 3 days, her story remained unchanged, and I remained resolute. Ellen was served with divorce papers at her workplace. Despite her attempts to reach out, I disconnected my phone and vacated the premises upon her return home. She enlisted a lawyer and proposed counseling, which I reluctantly attended as mandated by the court. During the initial counseling session, I heard the familiar tale from her once again. However, I remained skeptical and began to challenge her narrative. Despite this, the counselor took my wife's side, suggesting that I lacked openness and was overly judgmental. I was instructed not to contest any of Ellen's claims, but merely to listen, which left me feeling frustrated. The counselor further supported my wife's perspective, accusing me of being unreasonable, and the session concluded with me feeling unfairly criticized. I apologized and requested to express my own feelings in the following session. In the subsequent session, I addressed the issue of betrayal, presenting evidence such as Ellen's cell phone records and our credit card statements spanning the last 2 years. Additionally, Melissa provided credit card bills indicating Carl's motel room rentals, confirming their affair lasting over 18 months. I had several inquiries. Why did Ellen schedule appointments for hair and nails the day before my week-long absence, and not upon my return if it was meant for me? Why did Ellen make purchases at Victoria's Secret before my departure? During my absence, why did Ellen need to refuel her car more frequently than when I was home? What additional errands was she running? I didn't directly confront Ellen with these questions. Instead, I utilized these facts to establish the basis for my sense of betrayal by Ellen. When Ellen began disputing my conclusions, the counselor mirrored her previous actions with me. She encouraged me to freely express myself, which meant Ellen needed to be receptive to hearing about my feelings of betrayal. Ellen altered her narrative, but this time the counselor sided with me. By the end of the session, the counselor was dissecting the inconsistencies in Ellen's revised story. During the third session, Ellen offered a new confession, asserting she had told the complete truth. Subsequently, I requested to bring Brian Jennings to the office for the fourth session, which visibly unsettled Ellen. I then elaborated on discovering Brian's number in her cell phone records, along with a similar pattern of expenditures as I had observed with Carl. I also shared some extra details, my photo albums. I discovered pictures of Ellen with her father, a man standing at 6'0", with blue eyes and sandy brown hair. There were also images of Ellen's ex-boyfriend, who was approximately 6 to 6'2", possessing blue eyes and sandy brown hair. Carl and Brian also matched this description, as did 3 other guys from the fraternity. I possessed letters from each of them alleging that Ellen had flirted with them. Whenever I displayed photos of any of these individuals with Ellen, she appeared smiling and gazing up at them admirably. I still had 2 more former boyfriends I could have used to support my argument. However, I chose to hold off until I obtained a complete confession. I didn't want to reveal all my evidence at once, nor did I want to disclose that I had returned. After recounting the incident from a month before our wedding, Carl informed the counselor that I couldn't trust Ellen around any man fitting that description. The counselor then broached the question I had been avoiding. Did your father do something to you when you were young? Tears streamed down Ellen's face, but she remained silent. I rose from my seat and made my way to the door. Counselor, I find it difficult to trust my wife. I believe her father instilled in her a habit of deceit, likely to conceal the abuse he inflicted upon her. It seems to me that Ellen chose me over her previous partners because I don't resemble her father. Furthermore, I suspect she wanted me to raise children who were actually fathered by him. I suspect my physical traits, my shorter stature, brown eyes, and dark hair were factors in her decision, making it easier for her to convince her father that the children were his, not mine. Ellen recoiled, ready to argue, but I silenced her with a gesture. These are my sentiments, unsupported by evidence. However, they represent a deep well of mistrust that now stands between us, a mountain we must scale if our marriage is to survive. You've offered different versions of events in our counseling sessions, and I anticipate more until we unearth the truth. Counselor, I doubt I'll ever receive a candid response from Ellen until she confronts her past with her father. Welcoming her back now would only teach her to hide her indiscretions more effectively. And if my suspicions about why I was chosen are correct, I want no part in this relationship ever again. Ellen avoided my gaze as she spoke. These counseling sessions have only widened the chasm between us. The counselor nodded solemnly. I'll notify the court that counseling has been unsuccessful. After that, the divorce proceeded uncontested. As far as I'm aware, Ellen continues to seek counseling. 3 months later, Ashley showed up on my doorstep. John, I witnessed how you took care of 22 idiots, despite the fact that you were in great pain. I was hoping that you would accept my offer of a rematch, but you didn't. It really pissed me off, even though it helped to take my mind off my terrible ex-boyfriend. Ashley shifted nervously from one foot to the other. John, aren't you going to say something? Like what? Damn it. You're making things difficult. John, I can't stop thinking about you and how faithful you've been to your wife. Why couldn't I have a devoted boyfriend like you? You've ruined everything. Ash, calm down. Your words don't make much sense. Damn it, it's not like that. I wanted to engage in senseless nearness to forget my pain, and you and your damn devotion made me want to save myself for someone who really cared about me. Ashley began to sob uncontrollably. You show me that I can have complete faith in you. Ellen was incredibly foolish to betray you. Now that you're single, I believe I may have just found the man I want to father my 22 children if you're up for it. Ashley, are you proposing to me? Let's start with a date and see where it leads. I tend to be submissive and end up getting taken advantage of, but I trust you with my heart. I'll be here for a week, interviewing for jobs during the day, but free every evening to explore your world. And when you decide I'm the one for you, I expect you to sweep me off my feet and claim me in the bedroom. We tied the knot in Bricktown at the reunion the following year.